Today on the Relocated South African podcast, I am joined by Steve Felder from Montreal in Canada. He's a global executive with 25 years of experience leading businesses across shipping, logistics, cybersecurity, retail, and banking. More about that later. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you very much, and great to be here.
There is a moment in every relocation journey when the excitement gives way to admin. At Apostle, we help South Africans at home and abroad get the documents and visas they need for travel and immigration. Whether it is a police clearance, an apostille, and a bridge certificate, or visa paperwork, we help turn that moment from overwhelming to manageable. Visit apostle.co.za or email clients at apostle.co.za. Documents with convenience.
Lekker to have you. So when we talk about immigration or international work, you've worked in many places all over the world. Maybe to start with, where did you grow up, study, and how did this international journey start?
Well, I grew up in a small town 2 hours south of Joburg called Cape Town. And I have a dark sense of humor, which you'll discover during the podcast.
I was going to say I thought we were from neighboring towns because my town is also 2 hours from Joburg, but it's by car.
I've probably been there too. But I grew up in Cape Town. I started studying at UCT and I dropped out halfway and started working in Cape Town, and it all flowed from there. And my first move was to Joburg. I left at age 21 to seek fame and fortune. I'm still looking, by the way. But in those days, it was starting to become popular for Cape Townians to move to Joburg. Of course, that's where the business opportunities were, the employment opportunities, and also it was a pretty nice social life as well. So that's where it all started, and I started moving abroad much later on. But that's the beginning.
Okay, and what led you to leave in the first place, Steve?
Well, I actually left South Africa twice. So the first time, I had an ambition to move to Canada. That was what I had in mind, I guess, from when I was a teenager. I had a lot of friends in Canada. My uncle and aunt left South Africa for Canada when I was a teenager. And it was always on the radar. It was a place that I enjoyed. It was a place that I felt comfortable and relatable. So my uncle had a dental supplies business that he was trying to gear up for a sale, and he asked me to come and help him out over a summer, which I did. And but no sooner was I there that I got called back to my previous company, which was Sweets from Heaven. I don't know if you remember Sweets from Heaven, the candy stores.
I certainly do. So
I used to work at Sweets from Heaven in South Africa. I started as a cashier, worked my way up, and eventually was running the international franchise development. And then when I left for Canada, they called me back because they had made 2 acquisitions in the US, which they needed help with integrating. So I moved to Pittsburgh and I led their company-owned stores. There were 12 company-owned stores around the country. But contrary to Canada, or in contrast to Canada, I really didn't enjoy living in the US. I was 24, 25 years old. I was quite lonely. I was traveling more or less nonstop because, of course, the stores were all over. So I wasn't enjoying it, and I started looking for a way to get back to South Africa. And then I got a job offer from Jetline, which is a chain of franchised printing stores in South Africa.
I remember that, yeah.
You remember that? Yeah, so they're still going, and they're still going strong.
Oh, really?
And I was there to run their franchise division. So I moved back to Joburg at that time. Did that for a year. And then I got approached by African Bank. I don't know if you remember African Bank.
Oh, I do.
So yeah,
their CEO has just been fired, and he worked with me at Standard Bank. So,
again. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, it's been a bit of a roller coaster, I think, over the past decade for the business. But in those days, it was a super business. We had about 1 million customers. We were making about R1 billion a year, which in those days was a lot of money. And African Bank was actually formed out of the merger of 4 different micro lenders. And When they integrated, they realized that they had this franchise or licensee division that they didn't know what to do with. And it was in these far out places like Lusikisiki. So they brought me in to run that division and also to figure out what to do with it. And I ended up recommending to close the division. But I did a few other things for the bank, and I ended up running their special projects. And when you're head of special projects, what you basically are is you're the garbage can for anything that no one else wants to touch. So I ended up running restructures, organizational restructures, implementation of a new front-end IT platform in the branches. I ended up running all sorts of weird and wonderful projects. I was involved in the development of a credit scorecard. Very interesting. And then I got approached by a headhunter, Heidrick and Struggles, to join Maersk, which was at that time, it was the world's largest shipping line. Now they're number 2 because I left, of course. So Maersk had bought Safmarine, which was a South African domiciled company, and I would almost call them a regional specialist in Africa and the Middle East. In doing so, that they recognized at a point in time that there wasn't enough of a succession bench of executives, and they actually launched a program to bring in 5 executives from other industries, which I thought was quite a bold move, to deliberately go out and find people that have no experience in the industry. I mean, aside from occasionally driving through the docks on a Sunday to look at the ships, I never knew much about the industry. And so they recruited 5 of us. One guy was from the mining industry, one was from the education industry, one was from brand management, one was from consulting. And they deployed us all in different roles. So the first role that they gave me was like a branch manager type of role in Joburg, also looking after Botswana. I did that for 18 months, and that was great because it kind of gave me an opportunity to learn the nuts and the bolts of the business. But what I really got into and what really attracted me to the industry in the first place was the international nature of it. There are very few industries that are as international as shipping, just by the very design of the industry.
Ask Donald Trump.
We'll talk about the Donald. I have no doubt. I'm actually going on a tour of the White House on the 1st of May, which I'm looking forward to.
Oh wow, that's awesome.
But it's very international. Yeah, one you're returning an email from someone in Belgium, and then the next day you have a call with someone from Saudi Arabia or a customer from the US, and it's I really liked that. It really expanded my horizons. And 18 months later, they called me to take a role in the regional office back in Cape Town. So Cape Town was the regional headquarters for Sub-Saharan Africa. And they gave me the role of Chief Commercial Officer for Africa, which it was a nice promotion, but of course, I didn't have a lot of exposure on the continent, or certainly not enough. So those 2 years that I did that role really gave me an opportunity to travel around the continent. I've been to a lot of different African countries multiple times. And, in those days I used to drive as well because, in Nigeria, if you wanted to fly from, let's say, Nigeria to Ghana, instead of going direct, you actually had to go via Paris.
Oh, really?
So sometimes I just used to drive, let's say, from Lagos to Cotonou to Lomé to Accra to Abidjan. And it was much quicker and much more efficient. So that was interesting, a very interesting role and bridging, I guess, the strategy between head office in Copenhagen and Africa, and making sure that the voice of Africa is also heard in head office. And then there was a big restructure in 2008. And as part of the restructure, they pushed out a lot of empowerment to the countries, which meant that the size of the regional offices had to reduce dramatically. So they actually ended up decimating these offices, reducing headcount by 80 to 90%. So in Cape Town, I think we had about 150 people at our peak. And after the restructure, we had less than 15 or 20. So it was very, very severe. But they opened up a whole lot of roles overseas. And I was debating, where to go. My wife and I were still, we didn't have kids yet. So I applied for 2 roles. One was to be managing director for Mexico, and one was for managing director of Israel. These were the two jobs that I thought looked interesting and meaty enough, and also realistic enough for my level of experience. And I got the Israel job. So they told me about 2 months before. So immediately started planning that relocation. I'd never been to Israel before, but my wife had actually spent a few years there as a kid. So it was very familiar to her, not familiar to me.
Was that in Tel Aviv?
Well, my office, I actually had several offices there, but my main office was in Tel Aviv. And we lived in an area about 15 kilometers to the north, which is where a lot of the expats live. In fact, my next door neighbor, ironically, was the Canadian ambassador. So it's a sort of beachy area close to the city. It was so that was supposed to be a 3-year contract. It ended up getting extended twice, and my son, who's turning 16 in a couple of weeks, he was born there. He was actually born on South Africa's Freedom Day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And does he have an Israeli passport, or doesn't
no,
it
he
work?
doesn't. He doesn't.
Okay. So
No.
so birth doesn't give you
No, it doesn't.
right to a
Not
passport.
if you're a foreigner. No. So he has South African and Lithuanian, which is the same as what we have, me and my wife. And yeah, so he was born there, and then my elder kids are actually Irish twins. They're 361 days apart. And she was born. We actually went to South Africa to have her. So she was born in South Africa. And then my youngest, I'll tell you later on, she was born in South Africa as well. So anyway, it got extended twice. And then I got an opportunity to come back to Africa to run Maersk's business in East Africa. So initially it was Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, and South Sudan. And then later on, they added Ethiopia, Eritrea, Sudan, Somalia, and Djibouti. And when later on, in fact, once Maldives was under my remit, I always used to tell head office that I deserved Maldives after giving me Somalia for 5 years.
I can imagine.
As you can imagine. But it was a great part of the world. Great, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to travel in those areas, but it's a magnificent part of Africa. Wonderful people, wonderful nature, great weather, so much, potential and so much happening, especially in the likes of Kenya. I would go back to Kenya tomorrow. It was
really
just a fantastic place to live. So we had a wonderful 5 years there.
Sorry, let's just get chronologically. So you were 2008 to Israel. You spent how many years there? 8 years?
So almost 4.5.
4.5. Okay. Yeah. Then you went to Kenya. How many years there?
Kenya 2012, and I was there for 5 years.
Wow. Yeah. And then there's some more countries.
Yeah, there's a lot more. So yeah. So Kenya, after 5 years, I landed what, I thought was a dream job. And it really was, in many ways, was to run Maersk's business in South Asia. I always, used to love my trips to India. I was fascinated by the country and the people and the culture and the sheer magnitude of the place. They say India's an assault on the senses, and I was hoping to get an opportunity to live there, and I was fortunate that it came my way. So 2017, we packed up and we moved to Mumbai, and I was responsible for Maersk's business in India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, and Maldives. And India, of course, in itself, it was a very complex operation. Initially, we had 27 offices just in India. And then we added to that warehouses and container depots and all sorts of things. So it was a fascinating experience, business-wise, personally, culturally, really fascinating. And then COVID hit. I'll never forget, we were actually supposed to go to Dubai for spring break. And then we heard rumors we had an expat WhatsApp group called Masala Men. And the women's group was called the Spice Girls. And I'll never forget that, that there were just so many rumors going around that India was going to close the borders and we mustn't leave the country and so forth. So we canceled the day before we canceled the vacation, and we went off to Goa for a week. And on the last day of the vacation, that's when things started really getting hairy in the country. And you could just imagine in a country like India, where just in Mumbai, you've got 20 million people. If you get sick, if you get COVID and you need to be hospitalized, it's anybody's game, right? All bets are off. There's no guarantee, even with contacts and so forth. So very, very overwhelming prospect. So a lot of expats evacuated, a lot of South Africans in India. By the way, we had a very tight South African community where we used to get together every couple of months at someone's apartment. We were very close, including the folks at the consulate and so forth. And a lot of South Africans ended up leaving. They had an evacuation flight to Joburg, and then some people then after quarantine, they drove to Durban or to Cape Town. And we chose to stay. And our apartment building, you had to be a CEO to get a lease. It was an interesting scenario. So everyone was running a company, and we all used to compare notes almost every day. We used to meet at the pool. We didn't leave our compound. My driver didn't come to work. We told him not to come to work. Our house staff didn't, come in. We had one lady that stayed. And my wife would occasionally go out, but I was poop scared. I didn't want to go out. I was high risk because I've got asthma. So for 3 months, we basically lived in our compound. We had a pool, we had a gym, and some of us used to sort of walk around the building as well in the evenings. But it was confined. And then we decided that we were going to go to Europe for the summer, because actually I needed to get a new work permit. My work permit was expiring, and I needed to leave the country to get a new work permit. So we decided we were going to go to Denmark because that's where the head office was. And we've got European passports, so it wasn't a problem to get in. And so the first time I left my compound since, March 20th or whenever it was that the lockdown started was 3 months later to go to the airport to fly to Copenhagen.
Wow.
And so we went to Copenhagen. It was like a different world, because everything was open, everything was normal, more or less. You had to wear a mask on public transport, but that was nothing, compared to what we had in India. And everything was digitized. They had these testing sites that you could actually be tested every few days, and then you got a pass for 72 hours on your phone that you could go to restaurants, you could go to the gym. So very, very well managed, I would say. And we went off to Greece for a couple of weeks over August break. And then we had to make a decision of what to do. And it was absolutely clear from all the chatter and the coordination with the school back in Mumbai that there was no ways the school was going to open anytime soon. By the way, it ended up being closed for almost 18 months.
Wow.
So we decided to keep the family in Copenhagen and put the kids in school there, and I would commute. And that's what we did for a year. And so I was back and forth between India and Denmark. The family was full-time in Denmark. They visited India only once. But by that time, I was actually leaving Maersk. I had indicated that I wanted to do something different and possibly run a port, which I'd never done before. And I had a couple of options within the company to do that. But then I got an offer from a competitor, and which is Zim, which is much smaller than Maersk. It's the world's number 9. And I got an opportunity to run their Canadian business, which kind of ticked a lot of boxes from a personal point of view because we were able to move to Canada, and the idea was to settle down. So we moved to Canada, to Montreal, which is, of course, the French-speaking part of Canada. English, by the way, is not even an official language in Quebec. Only French is the official language.
Oh, wow. And it's Canadian French.
It's French-Canadian, which, when I speak to people in French, they understand me perfectly. When they open their bloody mouths, it's anyone's guess.
Yeah, I speak French as well, and the French Canadian's different. Yeah.
It's very different, very hard to understand. But anyway, it's a lovely place. So we've been here for 5 years. We've just survived our fifth winter. And by the way, we also have a very close-knit South African community here in Montreal. It's very small, again, because of the language. So we have a WhatsApp group. We get together in the summer. We get together for braais. We hit the beach. We really get together as much as we can. When there's rugby or something, there's a restaurant on the south shore of the river here that puts on the rugby, and South Africans meet. It's very, very lekker. It's a nice vibe.
Oh, that's awesome.
But there are no more than 80 South African families in the city.
Whoa.
They're all in Toronto or in Vancouver or Calgary and so forth. All over, of course, but those are the main hubs. Yeah, and we've been here for 5 years, and the plan is next year we're going to move to Toronto. We're just getting our permanent residence now, and the plan is to move to Toronto next year, and that will be, I guess, the permanent home until until our kids are finished university or whatever the case is, and then we decide to perhaps split the year. We would look at maybe where you are or in Greece or somewhere like that, spend a few months a year there. So that's that. That's where we are right now.
So, Steve, I'm going to ask you about the countries now. Just in terms of, so you're not employed by that smaller competitor anymore.
No, so I left the company middle of 2024. I did my 3 years there and handed over to my successor, completed the handover to my successor. And my idea was to take a year off. That's what I wanted to do, and figure out, what do I want to do when I grow up? Do I want to go back into corporate, because I've of course spent pretty much my whole career in corporate, or do I want to do something else and develop perhaps more of a portfolio career or an entrepreneurial career? I had a lot of amazing discussions and experience sharing with fellow YPO members, because I'm very involved in YPO. I gave a lot of time to YPO during my sabbatical as well. I'm still on the board of one of the global networks within the organization. And so it was interesting. And so I took a year off. I did my boating license. We went on 5 cruises. I kind of enjoyed life a little bit, started getting a bit more into shape, because I was really out of shape when I finished corporate. And looked at a few opportunities on the corporate side, mainly outside of Canada. And where I kind of landed was that I'm going to do something on my own and also build some sort of a portfolio. So where I am now, if you fast forward to today, a business partner and he's also a YPO. We acquired the rights for a global cybersecurity company for Canada, which is an industry that's always interested me, especially seeing, I was in the thick of a major cyber crisis at Maersk in 2017, which really paralyzed our business. We ran this massive business on WhatsApp and Gmail for 3 weeks, and it really fascinated and terrified me at the same time about the industry. So we launched that recently, and then I do boards and advising. I'm involved in a company in Lithuania that does aircraft leasing, helping airlines shore up seasonal capacity for their peak seasons. I'm involved in a company that does carbon capture in the ocean off the coast of New Zealand and sells the carbon credits. I'm an advisor at STS Capital, which is a global sell-side advisory out of Barbados, and a few other smaller things. I'm a small partner in a business that owns and operates RV parks, like trailer parks in the northeast of the US. So it's been very interesting and very different, but I still, I'm quite fortunate in that I still find time to, for some balance. Like most mornings I play pickleball for 2 hours. I don't know if
Oh,
it's
awesome.
taken off as much in Portugal, but here
It's more paddle here, but there is pickleball.
so padel is picking up here, but pickleball is still king, I would say. So, so it's a nice balance. It's a different stage, but I've still got a lot of runway. I'm 50 years old. I've still got,
You're a kid.
Don't always feel it, but so I'm still going to work for a long time. I enjoy it a lot.
It's awesome. Steve, I don't often get the opportunity to ask somebody who's been exposed to so many different countries, and I would assume each country has its own particular characteristics. But from your perspective, I mean, you've lived in Israel, Kenya, India, Denmark, you're now in Canada. If you compare those countries, where would you rather live? I suppose Canada, but I mean, each one must have something.
I think you hit the nail on the head. Every country has trade-offs. I have yet to find the perfect place. If you find it, let me know, please.
Portugal's close.
Portugal is definitely close. I would agree with that. But I think, I kind of always took the attitude that you've got to take the best from each place that you live. And you've also got to try and leave it a little bit better, whether that means, giving back to the community or volunteering or doing something. My wife has basically been volunteering in every country we've been in and, just invested a huge amount of time in giving back as well. She's really a champion of that. But I do believe in those, let's say, principles. I think that out of all the countries that we've lived, I would say the favorite one or the one we enjoyed the most, certainly I enjoyed the most, would be Kenya.
Really?
I think for the kids, each one of them would have a different response. Initially, they really were attached to Kenya. But I think over time, they really enjoyed their Denmark experience as well. The school was pretty, incredible. It was very much a safe haven for them during this pandemic. So, my wife, she really, she was very happy to be back in Israel where she had lived as a kid. She felt a lot of familiarity. And so it's a mix. But I would say Kenya would be, if you had to say to me, would you go live in Kenya permanently? The answer would be yes, I would.
Okay, well, that's a very good answer, Steve. And just in terms of making moves, obviously, it's easier when you move with a corporate. You've got assistants when you move. But I mean, that first settling in period, I hear that so many times on the podcast. People, the first 6 months, sometimes even longer, people take to settle down. Did it get easier for you guys adapting to new? Because these are completely different environments.
It's a very interesting question, and and I would say in general, for most of our relocations, the settling in was, at least for me, was quite easy, because when you're in corporate and you move with a corporate, as you say, it's easier, right? Because I leave one office on the Friday, and the next day, on the Monday, I'm in another office in another country. It's not so much of a shock for me. And I always settled it down personally pretty quickly. And I think YPO helped a lot with that, because, when you're able to tap into you've got like an instant network, and it's so practical that people are really willing to share so much. I can say, well, help me find a school, or give me some advice on where to live, or where can I find a place to have my hair cut? As simplistic as that. And people are just so generous. And, then when you get into the school communities, especially with the international schools, people also are extremely generous and very, very welcoming. And you have WhatsApp groups, and you have, email groups and so forth. So I think you have these mechanisms that if you leverage them, it gives you a softer landing. Canada was actually a bloody hard landing. And it's something that really surprised me. And I think that's probably for a few reasons. Firstly, there's the language. Here, this part is very, very French, and it's very different to the rest of Canada. Then that's both a positive and a negative thing, in a way. But it's an adjustment, And it cuts to schooling, for example. So if you want your kids to learn in English here, you have to get what's called an English eligibility certificate, which is only valid for 3 years, and you can only renew it once. So, there is no, if your kid is starting from grade 1 here, there is no prospect of them finishing school in English unless you find a private school that offers that. I mean, our kids are in private schools, but they still do some subjects in French. So so that part is quite daunting, I would say. Also, we arrived in the middle of a pandemic, which was not easy either. And there were a few other things. We were not able to buy a house because there was a foreign buyer ban here. The weather is, of course, a huge adjustment. It's just not something that we've had to contend with. It's, I have to walk my dog in minus 40, regularly. It's, it's just insane. You don't know if you're a boy or a girl. It's just horrific. And it stretches on and on and on, the winter. So Canada was quite a hard landing. And also, even with housing, I mentioned we couldn't buy a place, but we were looking to rent, and Montreal is not really a rental city. You can find a condo, but to find a house, we have a fairly big family. There's few and far between, and it was even worse during COVID. So, you learn, but it was definitely a hard adjustment. I think for my wife, certain places were a bit harder and took her longer to settle. Kenya took her probably a good 6 months to settle down, but then she didn't want to leave. She was so happy and loved it. And, once you get into your friendship circles and so forth, it becomes much easier. And the kids have been remarkably resilient. And I think that is the nature of kids. They have their networks all over the world and their friends that they keep in touch with. And of course, today it's so easy with Snapchat and with WhatsApp and so forth. But they settled down pretty much everywhere very quickly, which I'm very thankful for. I would say.
I mean, you mentioned the family thing. There's just a gazillion questions, but obviously a strong family connection relationship is critical for doing what you guys have done. If you didn't have a stable family, my sense is that it would be very difficult.
Completely agree. I think, and it's not to be underestimated. You have to be a pretty strong family unit with a high amount of interdependence in a way, in order for it to work, because there are challenges, right? And it could be something as simple as where do I have to change to winter tires, so I can't take the kids to visit their friends because I'm waiting for the guy to come to change the tires, or something relatively pedestrian, but it impacts someone else in the family, so absolutely but I think there's moving around, and especially the amount of times we've done it, I think overall it's a tremendous gift that you can give your kids.
Absolutely.
It totally transforms their thinking. It totally gives them the exposure, the cultural sensitivity, and so much more. And I think what really, India was really the one that was transformational, because it's just so different to everything else. They say that expats, they say that expats cry twice in India, once when you arrive and once when you leave.
Yeah. I was going to ask you.
It is so true. It is so true. It's the most fascinating, the most incredible, diverse, experience you can possibly imagine to live there. It's such a privilege.
And Steve, what do your kids identify as? I mean, you're still a South African. Jy praat nog van lekker, and you support the box and everything. But your kids, having lived in so many countries, how do they see themselves?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, if you had to speak to my kids, I mean, they all sound American, and they even sounded American before we arrived here because they've always been in the American schooling system. But my youngest, by the way, she had 100% Indian accent for like the first year in India. I've got videos you wouldn't believe, because her nanny used to speak to her in Hindi, and she just picked up everything, the language, the accent. It was incredible. but she, over time it faded. But it was just so funny and so cute. What do they identify as? I think if you had to say to my son, where are you from? He would say South Africa, although they've never lived in South Africa, right? And my elder daughter, probably the same. The youngest, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But right now, they also have a habit of kind of living in the moment. So let's say if we're on vacation, we go on vacation every summer to Greece. If someone says to them in Greece, where are you from? They say Canada. They don't even think twice. It's not even, it's not even a question. But they are really, third culture kids when it comes to the core of it. But it's interesting, like they still identify very much as South African, even though they've never lived there. I mean, obviously they visited a lot, many times and so forth, but they've never lived there. And I like that. It was quite funny in the American school in Bombay. They have a wall, and you have to put your passport photo. You have to stick it on the map. There's a big map, and you have to stick it from where you're from. And I don't know why I was waiting at reception one day, and I decided to look at this wall, and I see my kids. So my elder daughter, had put hers in South Africa. My son had put his in Japan, and my youngest had put somewhere around Madagascar.
Oh my word.
And I thought, what, that's our lives.
Say global citizens. I think that's awesome. A few things that also come up in a lot of discussions, and just asking you because you've been through it many times. Red tape. How difficult was the red tape for you guys? Obviously, with a corporate, it's easier, but you get faced with red tape around every corner. I would imagine.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that you said it with the corporates. They try and streamline as much as possible, right? So in Kenya, for example, I hardly saw any red tape because I had people at the office or my driver or whoever, just people to sort it out and to help us with pretty much anything. My most inconvenient thing was every 2 years I'd have to go to the immigration office to go in person to get my new work permit. Really not a big deal. So we were shielded from that. But in Israel as well, not a lot. The only red tape which was a bit of a pain, is every 6 months you had to renew your driver's license as a foreigner. That was painful. Okay. And I had to do a driving test in Israel as well.
Oh, no.
My wife ended up driving up a one-way down, and she then wondered why she failed during the test. So I think, Israel and Kenya were fine. India was next level. I mean, they say the British brought bureaucracy to India and the Indians perfected it. And I can tell you this, the amount of paperwork and the amount of checks and double checks and so forth. So, to get your foreigners, they have a special office just for foreigners. They call it the FRO, and it's kind of like as dreaded as SARS is in South Africa. And, you have to go and pretty much spend a whole day there every year to get your new work permit. The driving licenses, the rental agreements, there's just no getting away. And the tax returns, I mean, I think my one tax return was something like 80 pages.
I was going to say tax is the other thing, because you're now paying tax in a bunch of jurisdictions as you move along. So,
but India is by far, the most bureaucratic. And then you get they send you a certificate that you're a platinum taxpayer. I mean, who even wants to be a platinum taxpayer? So the bureaucracy has, it can be overwhelming at times, but yes, when you're in corporate, it's easier. I think in Canada, it's, it's not that difficult. And of course, everything is fairly digitized. I'd say the main two hindrances in this country is you have the immigration authorities, which, there's always backlogs and things take time. And I mean, if you're a South African, by the way, trying to get a Canadian visa, you can wait a year for an appointment.
I believe so.
It's crazy. So. And secondly is the healthcare here. We pay, of course, a lot in taxes. Quebec is, by the way, the highest tax part of North America. Access to healthcare, of course, it's all free, but you can spend the whole night in the emergency room waiting to be seen, right? And this happens very, very frequently. So the bureaucracy around the healthcare, it can be a bit challenging, but you learn to roll with it. And I must tell you, I got my golden visa for the UAE, which is basically like permanent residence. It's the best status that you can have outside of citizenship, but you actually get the same consular services as a citizen. And the efficiency was mind-blowing. Once I received the invitation from the government, you then have 90 days to go and complete the process. I arrived on a Sunday night. Monday morning, I did my medical. You have to have a blood test and chest x-ray. Half an hour later, I got the medical results via email, and I sent it to the agent, who then submitted it to the authorities. That same day, in the afternoon, I received my permanent residence certificate. 2 days later, I went for my fingerprints and biometrics, and the next day I got my Emirates ID card delivered to my house. I mean,
amazing.
It's next level.
But you've never lived there?
I haven't lived there, no. I used to spend a lot of time in Dubai. I used to visit, I would say, on average once a month, for a long time, but I've never lived there. But
okay.
I wanted to, because I was able to get the golden residency, I wanted to have it just, I guess, to keep my options open.
Absolutely. Steve, we can talk for hours. Just another question. When you left in 2008, did you kind of know that was permanent? I mean, did you sell up your base? Did you?
I didn't know at that time that it was going to be permanent. I think in the back of my mind, I always knew that I wanted to pursue an international career. And I thought that, when I joined the company and the industry, I felt that gave me a good opportunity, let's say a good chance to do that, to pursue that. But I still wasn't sure that I wasn't going to be back. And I have had opportunities to come back and, job offers and so forth. I think I only realized that I wasn't going back in, probably about 2017, when I was moving from Kenya to India, to the extent that they even changed my employment contract, because I was on a South African employment contract, but seconded to these different countries. And when I moved to India, we kind of looked each other in the mirror, me and HR, and said, okay, listen, this guy's not going back. And they changed me to a Danish contract, which just made more sense. So I kind of realized, I'd say at that time, that I wasn't going back, but no, not initially.
Okay.
And by the way, I used to visit a lot, especially the first decade. I used to visit a lot. Now I don't go very often at all. My wife still goes because, she's got elderly relatives and so forth, but I don't go to South Africa a lot.
I mean, it's quite a tough thing, but my view is you make these calls, you've got to not look over your shoulder. You've got to kind of commit to it, because if you look over your shoulder, you want to go back when things get tough. And it's just absolutely a fact that things will get tough. It's, moonshine and roses when you leave your country. So I think that's something that one has to accept. But the other side, I think, when you commit and you embrace what you're doing, you also become a better resident of that country. And
I agree with you.
That's very important.
I agree with you. It's the right attitude. I still, again, I still love the fact that I speak to friends in South Africa all the time, or my mother or whatever. I keep in touch a lot with people. I love the fact that I follow the politics and Squirrel Ramaphosa and Juju and everyone, but and I love the fact that we have a great South African community here, even though it's small, but it's, it's fantastic. And I love the fact that, that I can get biltong and boerewors here, which is not to be taken for granted. In India, I'll tell you a secret. In India, I used to smuggle in beef every month, because you're not allowed to have beef there. So, I used to, if I was in South Africa or in Dubai, I used to go to the butcher shop, which is the restaurant owned by South Africans. I used to get a whole lot of meat vacuum packed, and I used to smuggle it in my hand luggage.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, in general, do you think South Africans are better prepared for uncertainty than people from more stable countries, that we kind of more adaptable?
I do think South Africans are very adaptable, and I think I don't know exactly what causes that, what the genesis of that is, but I feel that South Africans generally, they embrace the places that they live and they add value to the places that they live. They're an accretive asset to their new countries or host countries. And I find that in so many ways, I'm fascinated and always impressed by what I see. How quickly South Africans have settled in, how quickly they've, you know, made names for themselves and created a positive impression. Through all my years everywhere, I've only heard locals say good things about South Africans, which I don't hear that a lot. You know what I mean? A lot of people whine about others, and I don't see that at all. And so I think South Africans have this remarkable industriousness and sense of realism, that they know exactly what they need to do in order to thrive. No, I'm
That-
generalizing, but I think that
uh,
by and large, this is what I see, and I've seen it now in so many countries.
But, Steve, I interviewed a guy the other day, Graham Cosgrove. He places doctors around the world, but specifically into Ireland. He's an Irishman. And he was saying exactly that the people love South African doctors because they come there and they have a can-do attitude. And
Yes.
that's what makes the difference. They're not looking for problems, they're looking for solutions. And I think that's what makes South African people great.
Boer maak 'n plan.
Exactly. I think the negative is sometimes, people that feel they were pushed out of the country have a negative feeling. And I really hate it when people, speak badly about South Africa. I think everyone has his reason for leaving, but the country is still your country. So I think that's, for me, is quite an important thing, that we, especially us living abroad, that we must still stay positive, regardless of what Squirrel and these idiots are doing.
Correct.
It's the country is still good.
Correct.
Just
And by the way, even on that, like I've met, by the way, I had breakfast with Juju, Malem, in, I guess it was 2017 or 18 in South Africa. I met him, Becky. I still keep in touch with a lot of, people, even in government. I keep in touch. I spoke to the ambassador here yesterday, so I still follow things very, very closely. And in Kenya, I was co-chair of the South Africa Kenya Business Forum, which is basically almost like a chamber of commerce. Just try to again give back a little bit and try help a little bit. Last year, by the way, in November, we had Grasa Michelle here, and I got to spend the evening with her, which was amazing. She's
wow.
simply incredible. So I
Very
still,
interesting.
it's in my heart, and I guess like you, it always will be. And I think, there are South Africans that moan and whinge, and, all they can do is criticize the country. And I understand it, by the way. It's, but at the same time, I think we should just be grateful as well for the upbringing that we had and the time we had there.
Absolutely. I'd really try and stay away from politics. I have to ask you, though, having lived in Israel, because, we sit here and we look at what's happening and we see mainstream media, and then there's so much false information. What is your sense, having lived there and lived among Israelis, about, the situation there now?
Yeah, I think, when someone, and people have asked me, what's your read on the situation? This was before the latest events and, the October 7th massacre and the war that followed. And I always say it's very difficult. It's an impossible situation because everyone's right.
Yeah, that's
And
a
I
good
think that everyone has valid narratives and valid claims. That said, I think your average garden variety Israeli wants peace and is willing to make sacrifices for peace. And I think on the other side, it's much more complicated. I mean, I had an office in the West Bank in Ramallah, So I've been there many times, and I've seen, I have contacts and friends there as well. But I think that the Palestinian leadership has never prepared their people for any compromises. They still have this pipe dream that they're going to liberate Jerusalem and this, that, the other. This is all cuck. It's never going to happen. uh, and Israel is not going anywhere. I think what they've achieved is incredible. From
Unbelievable.
really
Absolutely.
turning the desert into what it is today. A lot of strategic threats. I mean, I think obviously what we've seen in the last few years is extremely intense and unusual. I mean, one of my wife's neighbors, when she was a kid, he was his family was caught on one of these kibbutzes that was under attack on the October 7th massacre. And luckily, they were fine. They were not they were not hurt or anything. But it's scary, right, when it's close to home, because it's a small country. Everyone knows everyone, right?
Mm.
And one of the hostages that was taken was South African. A Viva Seagull, and you didn't hear a word from Squirrel.
No,
or anyone,
not.
right? Couldn't care less. They're too busy, as they say, show me your friends and I'll tell you who you are.
Mm.
So yeah, very incredibly complicated situation.
Complicated, yeah. Oh, thank you, Steve. I mean, we're getting to the end. There's two questions. If you were a young Steve now, or a young Steve comes to you and he says, "What should I do? Should I stay in South Africa, build a career here, or should I go?"
It's a great question. I'm so torn with questions like that because I think that it's so important to experience different countries if you can, and to at least visit, but even ideally live in and integrate in. You learn so much. It teaches you so many different life skills, and it really broadens your thinking. At the same time, what you sacrifice is quite it's quite profound, right? We keep having to reestablish ourselves every time we move. And even though we've got some people that help us, as I mentioned, and give us a soft landing, we have to reestablish ourselves, new friends, new places, and so I think that for a youngster today, if they're willing to commit to South Africa, warts and all, and willing to go the extra mile and make a success of it, and just throw themselves into life there and contribute constructively, I think it's still a great place to live, and it's got so many upsides. But then you also have to understand that you've got a pretty high chance of becoming an economic prisoner. And that's a trade-off, right? Because as they say, it can be easier to make 20 Rand than $1. I don't know if it's true anymore, but certainly it probably used to be. So I'm always in two minds, but if people have that wanderlust and they have that strong desire to, for young people to go and explore and to, look for other places, there's a whole world out there. I mean, I've been to 96 countries. And there's so much to learn and so much to see and try and find your place. And sometimes it's random, sometimes it's intentional. But that said, there's nothing like having a braai in Cape Town on a Sunday, or walking along the beachfront, or whatever the case is, or even in Joburg, going to the shopping mall or going to friends. It's you can't replace that anywhere.
Yeah, it's true.
So I probably didn't answer your question, but that's...
No, but I think you did.
When the excitement meets the admin, Apostle is here to help. We help South Africans at home and abroad with documents and visas for travel and immigration. Visit apostle.co.za or call us on 011 083 9830. Apostle, documents with convenience.
No, absolutely. I think that's a good note to end on, Steve. I mean, geez, what a journey. And all I can say is thank you. Thank you for reaching out, and thank you for sharing. I think it's just such a fascinating story. We can probably do a Joe Rogan episode and talk for 3 hours. But people...
Well,
But yeah, I Appreciate you making the time and coming on the show. Thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate the invitation, and it's been really great chatting with you.
Thank you. And to our listeners, if this episode resonated with you, please consider sharing it with someone who might enjoy the conversation. You can find more episodes of The Relocated South African on your favorite podcast platform or visit our website, therelocatedSouthAfrican.com. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.